Oh boy, free trading cards.
Pick a card, Betty. I show you a trick.
Get real, Gambit.
Now, Mr. Marvel himself, Stan Lee. Hi, true believers.
I heard he's pounding like Thor's hammer on Dr. Doom's titanium-infused faceplate.
This thing rules. The thing rules.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm Brian Altano.
And I'm Max Scoville.
This is a show where we discuss something we love,
Unpack why we love it,
explain where it came from,
try to remember our first impressions of it,
share our weird stories about it,
maybe learn something new about it along the way.
but first and foremost, we're here to celebrate the fact that this thing rules.
What's your first memory of Marvel trading cards?
Okay, so there was a store in my town growing up called Dollars and Cents, and cents was spelled S-E-N-S-E. And I think it started as a thrift shop. So it was just like, oh, your dollars should make more sense. It was very stupid, right? It was very punny. And it was run by this guy that we called Greg the Troll. And I think he called himself that too. And he was like this very just like sleazy East Coast New Jersey kind of like fast talking, underpaid his teenage employees and ripped off everyone who came in. And one of my friends at school was like, have you heard of Marvel cards? And I was like, no, what's that? And he brought a pack in and started flipping through them. And he's like, I got them in the store in town. And I was like, I went home and I was like, just digging through my piggy bank. And I'm like, Dad, we got to go to the store and pick up a pack. And I remember going in there, getting it for the first time and tearing it open and sitting in the car and just being in total awe of the idea of having like, I forget how many were in the pack, 12 or 20 or something like that, maybe even 10, having like 10 beautiful, gorgeous, hand-drawn pieces of art based on comic book characters, most of which I'd never seen before in my life, in the palm of my hands, without having to get a bunch of disparate comics or anything like that. These were self-contained, individual rectangles of Marvel, and you flipped them over, you had all the stats and all the power and stuff like that, and I was immediately smitten with the idea of the whole thing and the concept of not knowing what you were going to get and like being able to trade with friends. It just immediately opened up this door to me, and I think that was probably, I want to say, like, might be my first experience like getting into trading cards, period. I know there was like Garbage Pail Kids around the same time, so those are sort of messed up in my head, but Marvel cards were really, really special to me as sort of an entry course into the MCU, or the Marvel, not the MCU, before there was even movies, and just collecting cards in general. So yeah, Marvel cards rule.
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head in every possible direction there. Also, like we're coming at this from obviously like a nostalgic angle where we're, elder millennials or something like that, where, the early 90s was a boom time for both comics and cards. So this Greg the Troll guy was onto something, and it was a very very lucrative point in time because the comics had become this huge collector property, and cards kind of filled an interesting gap there. They'd been around for a while, the idea of like pop culture cards, and this is again something that we also didn't fully grasp because we've grown up with VHS, and the idea of being able to watch a movie was always kind of there for you. But for the longest time, any popular movie that came out would get its own line of trading cards, and that was your way of basically like reliving scenes from that movie. Flipping through like, oh, here's a still image of this thing. Star Wars, Alien, stuff like that all got their own lines of trading cards.
There's that famous one from Batman, is it 89 or Batman Returns, where it's like Alfred bringing out gazpacho or whatever.
It's vichyssoise.
Yeah.
Served ice cold, one of the top 2 ice cold soups. But yeah, in the comics department, the thing that wasn't happening then was they weren't really reprinting older issues. Like They were trying to drive up the price of collector stuff. They were churning out lots and lots of like, collector's edition, issue number 1 with holographic foil cover and doing all these different spin-offs and everything. But the idea of like the trade paperback or the collected edition of like classic issues, those are harder to come by. So in the same way that like flipping through trading cards of movie stills from a movie that you couldn't watch because it wasn't in theaters in the 70s, in the 90s, if you wanted to find out about like, your favorite character's origin, it was cheaper to, find a trading card that basically gave you the cliff notes than it was to track down that original issue or find a reprinted version of it. Marvel was, Marvel has always been really interesting from a business perspective. I don't know shit about business. They definitely seem like they were taking some big swings. They basically had the market cornered on trading cards, which is one reason that Marvel cards are such a beloved property. And like there were DC cards, but they weren't as much of a thing. Let's see. So I dug into this a little bit. The original Marvel line that kind of blew up was the one that was first printed by Impel Marketing, which began in 1990. That was the Marvel Universe cards.
That was my first. Those were my first ones.
Yeah, it was Impel
Series
Marketing, Series 1, 1990. They have really they have charming art. It honestly seems kind of quaint at this point compared to some of the stuff that would come later, which would hire like really incredible illustrators to just do their best to really bring out their A game.
What was interesting about that line was that outside of like the art, which was very sort of like 80s comics at the time, right? Sort of like turn of the decade. And they had this interesting graphic design around the outside, right? Which was these borders. And that feels like it was not lifted from, but heavily inspired by a lot of the sports trading cards that were happening at the time. And I wasn't into those because I wasn't really into sports growing up, but my dad was, my brother was, and stuff like that. So I would see a lot of that show up, and these larger than life figures would appear, like here's this big hockey player, this, a basketball player or something like that. And then would have that border art, and on the back would have all the stats and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then the 1990 Marvel cards came out, and I was like, oh, this is that, but for me.
Right. The funny thing there though is that they would incorporate those stats. And with baseball, there's like a bunch of very there's a bunch of very complicated statistics, and it's all based on real information and actual averages and all that stuff. When you're like looking at a 1 out of 10 scale of like how powerful Galactus is, and then you're comparing that to like Punisher, like who would win in a fight?
It was awesome. It was awesome. It would lead to a lot of like sort of playground arguments and disputes, and you would trade cards based on what you had or what you didn't have, but also like power levels and stuff like that. But it was also, it felt like when you watched A New Hope the first time and it said episode 4, it was this idea that this thing had been happening before you got there.
Yeah, and it lent this amount of... It was simultaneously fantasy, but also this level of like science to it.
Yeah. Like seeing a card where Spider-Man and Hulk are fighting, and you're like, that happened? Whoa.
Yeah. They know each other?
Yeah.
So it's really funny. That first line, I don't know if you remember any of these, but they had basically it was 162 cards. There were 5 holograms, kind of the general breakdown moving forward. I think some had more, some had less. The 5 holograms obviously were the big, they were the big deal. They were the coolest thing you could possibly find in there. I don't even know how rare they were.
I think there was something like 24 or something packs per box, and on average there was 1 hologram per box.
God, that's nuts.
Really, really tough pull rate as a kid.
Yeah.
So when you got one, it was your Willy Wonka golden ticket moment. Like I remember
it was totally the golden ticket mentality. Like,
and they weren't like the art itself. Like the thing is, like at the time we had holograms, right? Like holograms were pretty ubiquitous. In fact, they were like not necessarily played out, but they were everywhere. You got them on stickers, you got them in like cereal boxes and stuff like that. And so the actual holograms themselves in the 1990 Series 1 of Marvel cards were pretty basic. Like it was just like I think some of them were
great.
They're not that great, but like I remember getting Silver Surfer and being like, this is incredible because this looks like his character does in the world. And so the holograms were really special, and if you ever got doubles, you could trade with somebody. And like I think
did you ever have a hologram you pulled from the pack?
So I did, and I think I eventually ended up getting the full set because me and my friends figured out that if we pooled money together and we got boxes, it was cheaper. And so we would go in and
buy them by the carton.
You buy them by the carton, and then divvy them up between friends. And it was just, I remember like specifically sitting on a curb, like down the street from this comic shop, just tearing open packs and then going through them and trading with each other on the spot. And there was a bunch in that line specifically that really stuck out to me in terms of really cool art based on characters I didn't know much about. And number 1 was the Blob. And what was cool about the Blob, they repeated this in later series too. The Blob, I don't know if you remember this. The Blob in the first set of Marvel cards is just like back against the wall and just absorbing bullets. they're just shooting him, and there's these fat ripples happening all over him, and it's this really cool, like a lot of the art in this set was sort of like a hero pose, right? Like it's just like, here's Spider-Man, he's perched on a wall, or like, Wolverine's over here, he's maybe coming out of the, with an attack a little bit, but like a lot of them weren't really in battle unless it was specifically like, this is two characters fighting. The other thing I remember specifically about this line was that we all thought Fool Killer was the coolest card in the whole set because he had a 100% win rate. He had a 100% win rate because the motherfucker only fought like 7 battles, but he won all of them. And whereas if you looked at like Wolverine and Hulk and Spider-Man, these guys were in like dozens and dozens of battles, like 70, 80, like the amount of times. And again, like this was me showing up to something that had been going on for a long time. I didn't have the ability to go catch up on a bunch of back issues. Like you said, there was no trade paperbacks. So I had to just take these things literally at face value or back of the card value and understand that like these things were based on not real events, but like lived in actual stories that happened in Marvel Comics.
It took me an embarrassly long time to realize that there was no like long-term plan for Marvel. Yeah. And that they make it up as they go along for the most part. Like you'll get like a Jonathan Hickman or whatever to come in who's going to plan out the next 3 years of like story, plot twists, like story arcs. But like, I guess in my head, I was like, oh, I see where this is going. And it's like, there's nowhere it's going, like I don't think when like the Dark Phoenix saga was happening, they were planning for Marvel to declare bankruptcy 15 years later or whatever. No, like they don't, they kind of, they take it as it comes. But the cards really, they have that level of like, again, they have statistics to them, which makes it seem like in the same way that, oh, I don't know, people read reviews for movies or video games on certain websites and they see if there's a score at the bottom that it's like, if it's got a decimal point in the number, it seems more real than if it's just 3 out of 5 stars,
Right. And they were good. It was good fodder for debates with people at school because you had mathematical statistics to back you up.
What's funny is they also were like, they did not take themselves seriously. There was an entire subset of these cards called Spider-Man Presents, which were very much like, a lot of these, again, you got like the Blob getting shot. You got like the Fool Killer. I pulled up this card. He's like a dude in like a leather vest with like a GIMP mask on, holding one of like Jango Fett's blasters over some guy's corpse.
And it just seemed like the coolest thing in the world because you were also like, wait, where is this guy? Like, this guy's this nomad, not to be confused with Nomad, who also had his own card, who is just drifting around the outskirts of the Marvel world, just fighting people 6 times and winning every time. Like,
I've been in more fights than that.
But there's a lot of really funny stuff that happened in that first line. Like I think there's a card.
Hold on. Let me tell you about the Spider-Man. Do you remember the Spider-Man Presents at all? So
those were great.
These were like totally hammed up. They were these little 1-panel comics of Spider-Man interviewing other characters. And I pulled a bunch of them up, and they range from like just fucking lame to like really weird. Like there's one where he's talking to Thor and he's like, hey Thor, what's up with that hammer? And he's like, Thor in his old English voice is like, hey, when I retire I shall be a carpenter with this hammer. And it's just like, that's your joke? He has a hammer, and hammers can you use for carpentry?
Did you see the one where he's talking to Wolverine and Wolverine's just annoyed and like kind of slumped over and he's like, so your real name's Logan, huh? Is that your first name or last name? And Wolverine's like, yes.
I love that you remember that off the top of your head.
I do.
See, that's one of the good ones. That actually feels like a joke.
Stuck with me forever.
There's a couple that are just really bizarre. There's one where he's talking to Magneto, and he says, Magneto, why do you hate the X-Men so much? And he's like perched in this little like homemade web hammock, and Magneto is sitting in this big ass chair, and it's like a totally like like old school like Silver Age Magneto with a big bubble head. He looks like he's asleep, and he goes, I don't know. I just find myself strangely attracted to them. That's a little magnetic humor there. And it's like, oh man, you're trying to wipe out the human race. You should probably be working on your material a little bit too.
He's like, I'm a Holocaust survivor that's trying to kill a bunch of like, allegorical like teenagers who have been ostracized by society, but let's do a couple of jokes.
I feel like that is authentically Stan Lee humor right there, though. Like that level of just like hamming it up.
Stan Lee got his own card in this set called Mr. Marvel. Do you see if you haven't seen that one in a while? It's very funny because it just looks like a weird like mashup concert.
Oh yeah, that's terrifying. I remember this.
Yeah, it says Mr. Marvel, and it took me a minute to
He
be
just
like,
looks like a Super Skrull, but with a
yeah.
mustache.
And I wasn't sure if he was if that was a character in the comics or like Stan Lee or both. Like being a kid and seeing this stuff and not having all the information was very funny because you filled in a lot of blanks.
That is
But yeah,
bizarre.
that whole set was, I was obsessed with them. My friends were obsessed with them, and they only got better.
Yeah, so they definitely got better. I got a couple more Spider-Man presents. There's one where he's talking to Punisher, who's standing on the edge of a building with a gun, like he's really just looking like he's not doing so hot.
Okay.
Just a really troubled veteran right there. And Spider-Man jumps out, and they're in the moonlight, and Spider-Man's just on the wall. And he's holding out a microphone, which I feel like if you see a guy on the edge of a building with a gun and a skull on his shirt, you don't really want to just hold anything out suddenly to him in the night. Like just putting a microphone in his face is just But he says, Punisher, is your real name Frank Castle? And he just goes, yes, but I prefer Francis. Which I love how that turned into like I don't know if it was coincidental or if it had anything to do with it, but that was just like a running gag about the bad guy in the first Deadpool movie.
Yeah.
And then there's a weird one, which is just, again, it's like the most innocent, squeaky clean humor, but it feels like there's something slightly scatological about it. But he's talking to Captain America, and Spider-Man's constantly just like not doing proper dynamic Spider-Man poses. He looks like he's kind of like, it looks like when cosplayers try to imitate Spider-Man, but they're in like a convention center and they're sort of like awkwardly hunched on a trash can or fighting a worse dressed Green Goblin. But he goes, Cap, did you get your superpowers from the super soldier serum? And he just goes, Cap goes, yes, but it was a mistake. I thought I was drinking a glass of lemonade. And it's just like, that's so like, it's just like, what, like what a weird, I don't know, like the amount of time that it took to draw that, probably could have come up with a better joke in there somewhere. I don't know.
I mean, it was one of those things where you're like, is this serious or is this goofy? Like it was this really interesting tone.
Totally. So anyway, I want to back up a little bit here. So Impel, did you know that it was originally a tobacco company?
No.
So
no.
Impel Marketing was a subsidiary of tobacco company called the Liggett Group, which I guess they broke off into separate companies, probably for some either bookkeeping reasons or probably just straight up legal reasons. But you talk about being hunched on street corners with your friends, ripping open packs, trying to get your fix, and it's like you can see a lot of very similar kind of DNA between cigarette marketing and trading card marketing, and like
splitting cartons with friends.
Exactly, right? I wish they had holographic cigarettes. One like Chase variant in there. I guess that's your lucky. You flip it upside down. That's the rare one. But no, like it's digging into this. There's a lot of. This isn't news. Like the first baseball cards were included with packs of cigarettes in like the Civil Warrior or whatever. But the Liggett
tobacco
group
cards and stuff, right?
Yeah, tobacco. Yeah, that was the whole thing. So Impel had its background there. They started doing the Marvel stuff. But Fleer, on the other hand, who was the other company that did a bunch of the Marvel cards, they had been around since 1906 as a candy company. And they were one of the first places that made bubblegum. This is a whole separate detour. Bubblegum isn't something I have very strong feelings about, but it's definitely got interesting origin stories. They made the first bubblegum, which was called Blibber Blubber. And Blibber Blubber was apparently never properly marketed because it was so sticky that if a kid blew a bubble and popped on his face, they had to use solvent to take it off.
Oh my God.
And so that just stayed on like a shelf somewhere. And then this guy...
Fucking Looney Tunes.
Right?
Shit.
Yeah. And then I guess someone
Did
came
they
along
also sell exploding cigars?
I mean, honestly, that was probably more of a Impel product over there. Like, busy. Kids love exploding cigars. They're a wacky prank. One in every 24 packs explodes. But the Blibber Blubber was not a hit. But then another guy came along and basically introduced Double Bubble, which became the standard for bubble gum. Like that was the first pink bubble gum that basically all of the pink bubble gum was modeled after. But anyway, they had also been doing cards, like sports cards, collectible cards included with candy for, decades when Marvel came along. And it's funny, they put out in 1991, they put out their first Fleer Ultra cards. And they'd been doing, they've been doing baseball, they've been doing all sorts of stuff. And like you look at older cards and they're like, they'll be like the really older ones they're just like cardstock on the back, or they're cardboard on the back and like gloss on the front, not even glossy. Like the ones you get that come with a pack of bubble gum, like Tops or whatever. Those
There's
ones
literally
are,
no colors on the back.
yeah, you could like write notes on the bad with like a number 2 pencil.
And
but,
the border art is always like it's like a something from like like a Print Shop Pro or whatever.
Yeah, it's not
just like
great.
a clip art banner.
Yeah,
with the
so
guy's name on it.
Fleer Ultra, on the other hand, was their whole big thing, which used like UV quality cardstock photo printing and had like foil embossing and all that. And Marvel apparently came in and bought the company in 1992. And around this time, like the Marvel cards were blowing the fuck up. Like the Impel line had been going. Impel actually rebranded as Skybox, which is what I first encountered them as. To go down memory lane here, my first exposure to these, I don't remember if X-Men was on TV at the time yet, or if I had just become like vaguely aware of it, or if it was just like my friends were talking about it. But
Yeah, it was
the
just
day
kind of there.
Yeah, it was again like they didn't advertise trading cards on TV. That's the thing that's amazing. It was just organic, viral. Like you put them at a checkout stand at a corner store or something. Like
Yep.
But I think I finished first grade. Might have been first grade or second grade. Can't remember. Got home, it's like June. I get home from school. My mom picked me up. And as a treat for finishing school, there was this like antique box that she'd had. It was on her dresser or whatever. It was this old, like, this like cool looking brass Moroccan hand-me-down thing. And I was like, what's up? She's like, yeah, that's for you. You can have that. I was like, oh, cool. A box. Like, okay, whatever. And I open it up and it's full of brand new packs of Skybox trading cards, and I think some Fleer was in there too. I forget, but it was a whole like just a shitload to open at once, and like I was in,
Oh man,
and then from there it was
so
like
cool.
I love that like my first 3-ring binder wasn't for school; it was for trading cards.
Yeah, same. I mean, you would get those the sheets that were like 10 cents each at the time. And they held 9 cards. And what was cool, and we'll talk about this in a bit, some of the later sets incorporated that, knowing that that's how people were storing them. And they would use the 9 cards to create one big card. I remember, again, not to deviate too much, but Garbage Pail Kids were stickers. And they did the same thing where you would put them together. And I remember on the back of my bedroom door, I had a bunch of like ugly fuckers made of, like 9 cards or whatever, however many cards it was. The interesting thing about the boxes too was they were all designed to be displayed. So the actual full boxes of Marvel cards had this sort of like, not an emboss, but like a perforation on it where like Spider-Man would pop up. So you would push the lid back, and stack the cards inside it. So it had this big sort of like marquee thing sticking up. And being a kid in a store, you would see all the baseball cards doing that, hockey cards, basketball cards, wrestling cards, whatever they had, Gulf War cards. And then you would see the Marvel cards, and you would see like a big Spider-Man, and he stuck out. And when me and my friends chipped in on boxes, the boxes were sealed in plastic. And so that was totally flat. So that felt like this thing where we were like, I remember reading Nintendo Power, right? And in Nintendo Power, they had this one section where they talked about like all the hottest games coming up. And there was like the pros picks, which was like professional gamers, whatever that meant at the time. And then it said dealers picks. And I was like, what is what's a dealer? So a guy that sells video games, like a dealer? Okay, interesting. And like early E3 started as like a not necessarily a show for consumers, but for people to sell stuff. And so getting a box of Marvel cards that was sealed and didn't have the marquee art popped out felt like, I was like, oh, I'm buying something wholesale. Like I'm buying something before it gets to the store shelves, before kids can get it. So it felt like this, like not cheating, but like it was like, oh shit, this is such a cool feeling.
So I did that as an adult. I think this is actually. So I was going to save these for later, but I got some vintage 94 Fleer Ultra cards right here.
Oh my
sealed.
God.
I bought a pack of these in, I guess, 10 years ago at this point when they were only 20 years old. And back then, like a sealed case was like, it was not that expensive.
Right.
It was honestly probably cheaper than it was when they first came out, because ultimately they're pieces of cardboard, and it's like, it's a collector market. So once the collectors get their fill, or once people realize, again, like comics, that foil covered #1 collector's edition issue that they printed however many thousands of, like, if everyone buys one, it's worthless. Like it's not a collector's item if it says collector's item on it. It's a collector's item if collectors are seeking it. You know, like it's one of those things. But
they also age better because to my knowledge, they never came with gum.
Yeah,
and so I don't know if you've opened a pack of trading cards that has gum in it, but it basically just fuses itself to whatever is on the front. Because we're talking like 20, 30-year-old.
No, I that's the thing is those packs of gum, like they're not like those gum era trading card packs are like not they're not worth much. No. You can go to Comic-Con and get like a grab bag of those for dirt cheap.
Yeah.
And then if you eat the gum, you can get an exclusive foil plated trip to the hospital because that's I had to explain to my kid, a buddy of mine, Tamor Hussein from the Giant Bomb, went to Comic-Con and brought me back just like a wonderful little grab bag of random cards. I think it was, let's see, it was one pack of Marvel, it was one pack of the original Alien, Return of the Jedi, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, and I think there was something else, but I basically
the original Alien, like the movie,
the original Alien, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And I had I've been having a bad summer. I had been having a really shitty time. It was a very thoughtful little thing, and I was just kind of feeling down on my luck. And I opened up all these packs, and in the Return of the Jedi, I got a Boba Fett sticker. And in Alien, I got a Tom Skerritt sticker, which was less exciting. And in the Ninja Turtles 3 pack, they were all cards based on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. So I kind of missed out there. That was
that's a low ceiling.
Yeah, really. I wasn't really hoping for much from there. But opening the X-Men pack, I got my first ever holographic card from a pack. So this is from the Impel 1992 line. So probably series 2, 3 maybe.
So that's a hologram that's been sitting in a pack unopened for 22 years.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I just was like,
who was it?
It's Cable.
Oh,
and it's
fuck,
it's a fucking gorgeous card. Like it's really, and also like I had the only holographic card I had growing up from my superhero days was Spectre, the DC guy who's basically looks like the Jolly Green Giant if he was like 5'10" and wore panties. And the only reason I had that card is because I traded my friend Marty a little pewter dragon for it. And I just wanted it because it was holographic. Not because I like Spectre. I don't even know what his deal is anymore. But like, to actually pull one out of a pack was very exciting. I think I'd had like one holographic Pokemon card from back in the day, but it was like Vileplume or something. Like it wasn't like a very cool one. So that was nice. But yeah, like that thrill of like pulling out something mysterious from a pack is great. And I was like, I'm chasing that high. I want to, do that myself. So I, 10 years ago, I was like, I'm buying a case of these Fleer cards. And I open a bunch of them, and like there's definitely like they are like cigarettes in that there's a rush where you're like, oh yeah, cool. And then you're just like, I'm just doing something compulsively at this point.
Yes.
Like I'm just, fidgeting with this, and it's you reach a point where you're chain opening packs. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to sit on some of these. I'm going to save them for a special occasion. I figure this is a special enough occasion. I'm gonna open this up. We're gonna see what's in here. This is
93. You said 90?
These are 94 Fleer Ultra. This was the first line of X-Men cards. This is just X-Men, not Marvel, which was at the time kind of pretty much interchangeable.
Yeah. So this is the show's already a thing.
The show is going strong. These
toys are a thing.
It's probably like Car Logic, where this was actually came out in 93. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. The action figures were everywhere. It was a good time to be an X-Men fan. There was a lot of X-Men comics everywhere. Obviously, still years away from the first X-Men movie. But
so this is my favorite line because like all the other ones they had comic artists working on them, which was cool. This one was like full on like illustrators. This had like these were all like painted. Like these were all like this was definitely like a huge inspiration on me in terms of like doing art. Okay, here we go. First one I got. X-Force, specifically Cannonball, Richter, Siren, and Sunspot, which I think is one of those sort of mosaic ones where you put three of them together and it lines up the whole group. Mm-hmm. So this is funny because it's, let's see, who painted this? What does it say? Painting by Dan Brereton, who I dug into some of the artists who worked on this line, and they did a bunch of other stuff. Like there was Bill Sienkiewicz is one of my favorites who did a bunch of this, and it's funny that they didn't get him to do this because X-Force began as New Mutants, and Bill Sienkiewicz did a ton of like the classic X-Force covers, but I think he was probably just really fucking tired of painting Cannonball at that point. All right, next we got X Factor, a much more 90s team. Specifically, it's X Factor, but it's Random and Strong Guy, which if you don't see the comma there, it honestly looks like a parody of superheroes where it just says X Factor, Random, Strong Guy. And it's Random is... he's like if Lobo had gun hands, kind of. You remember this dude?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, just a ripped guy in like a biker jacket with no sleeves, and his hands are guns.
That was one of the... when I was getting into X-Men, like finding out about the sort of diagonal X-Force and X-Factor stuff, just immediately confused me. I remember
it's still confusing.
To this day, yeah. I'm still like, wait, what?
Yeah. No, and then, yeah, like it's also great because so many of these things, like these are how I learned certain words. Mm-hmm. Like that's how I learned what random was.
Abominable.
Yeah, abomination. Yeah. All right, so I got Magneto.
Fuck,
and this
yeah.
is Magneto looking proper. This is not like Magneto sitting on a chair getting fucking, grilled by Spider-Man. Okay, so it's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is a classic. This one, I feel like this is one of the ones that was on the foil packs or on the boxes.
Yeah.
And this is a gorgeous painting. It didn't occur to me that these were painted probably really big. Like they probably did these on big ass pieces of Bristol board and then shrunk them down for the cards. Yeah, like nobody was painting stuff at this level. But of course, when you're a kid and you try to make your own trading cards, you wind up like,
Well, I want to say there were contests at the time, either in comics or in the card packs themselves, where you could win autographed originals. And they were like much larger.
God.
Not poster size, but I feel like they were like probably double the size of a comic book. So like pretty beefy.
Yeah, like a 10 by 14 Bristol board or whatever. Yeah. So okay, yeah, this was when like comics were taking this shit pretty seriously. And again, like these have like a little foil imprint at the corner. It says X-Men 94 Fleer Ultra. This line they revisited, I think, in 2021 and did like an entire new generation that
interesting.
Nailed the style guide so well that looking back at like the trying to find like old cards or trying to look them up, I'm like, wait, that character wasn't introduced yet, and then being like, oh no, they just recreated that format like phenomenally well. So okay, Magneto, a victim of Nazi brutality, the master of magnetism is determined to save mutants from a similar fate. But by using that same brutality against humans, he has become the most feared mutant alive. And then it has like a little grid on his face and it says force fields, capable of withstanding both energy and physical attacks, total magnetic control, can warp metal, move objects, manipulate the Earth's magnetic field. We knew all that, but like, I love that they ditched the stats for these ones. Like they didn't get statistic, but they still got like, there's sort of like a...
Still got granular.
Yeah, this is like mutant power profile, and it's got like I think there's 9 different fonts on the back here. It looks like a
That was a extremely 1994 thing, is to have no graphic design style guide whatsoever.
All right, I got Shinobi Shaw, who just looks like a full-on sex pest. What is Shinobi Shaw's deal? He's like Sebastian Shaw's son or something. Yep. Shinobi Shaw is so ruthless that he killed his own father, X-Men foe Sebastian Shaw, as part of his initiation into the sinister upstarts. His mutant power pales in comparison to his cruel cunning devoted to destroying the X-Men. And then his power is intangibility, the limited ability to pass through solid objects, which is just like, what can he do? Yeah, he can just leave. It's just, ooh, all right. I got a foil card. I've never seen this one before. This is dope. This is one of the ones that's part of the little subset. This is a limited edition subset of 9. It's Storm, and she's fucking around. I think I can't tell if it's a danger room or if she's in space or what. There's like a spaceship behind her. It's interesting because like the art in this line was like so gorgeous and painterly that like turning it to holograms would kind of like ruin it a little bit. So they did like a weird half measure here where it's like a color foil in the background and painted in the foreground. Still looks pretty neat. That's cool. And then I've got some, I got Reaper. I don't know his deal. I guess he's in the Mutant Liberation Front. Oh, he's one of Strife's buds. And then I have Dark Phoenix, looking pretty cool there. Mm-hmm. Copycat, Deadpool's girlfriend.
Oh, right.
Vanessa Carlyle, who doesn't shapeshift in the movies at all. And then I got, this one's fucking sick. I got, Weapon X, in parentheses, Wolverine, and it's got him this wonderful, sketchy, like watercolor, like just almost like Francis Bacon looking painting of Wolverine with his shirt off doing the whole VR training thing.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
there we go.
That's a gorgeous one. And then this is one I remember having as a kid, just Rogue, just looking like Rogue. I was hoping I'd get some Sienkiewicz ones in here, but like, because those are the coolest ones, because he was like incredible, just like mixed medium painter. That's a thrill. I love opening a pack of comics.
It's such a good feeling.
Trading cards, looking through there.
So to backtrack really quick before we got to the 1994 ones where they were very clearly painterly, Marvel masterpieces.
Yeah.
In 1992. So
was that 92?
That was 92. I had front row seats to that, and I need like to explain the jump in art quality from the 1990 Series 1 cards to the 1992 Marvel masterpieces, which were all painted by Joe Jusko.
Joe Jusko, okay.
Was
the second series was the Brothers Hildebrandt? Was that it?
I believe so. So they looked like oil paintings, and the cards were shiny, and dude, it felt like going from like Legend of Zelda to Link to the Past. Like it was just one of those leaps that you don't really get anymore in media, right? Like it's just everything now is just like gradually improved. Like we've hit ceilings in a lot of different sort of art departments across video games and pop culture and everything like that.
That's a really good way of comparing. Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. And so to get these, everything about them felt premium. They were definitely more expensive, but also like the box itself was, shiny and had that sort of like foil tint to it. The art, the packs were shiny. Like they all had this very premium feel to them, which echoed a lot of what you talked about before. Like what the comics industry was doing at the time was figuring out how to get people like us to buy special comics, because like just the stories and just the art and just the artist wasn't enough. You needed like a hologram embossed cover with a special polybag and all this other fun stuff. And so this was them being like, how do we get to like a premium collector market? But I was still a kid. But I remember like my mom was an artist. She was a painter and an architect and all this other stuff. And this was the first time I could be like, hey, like look, they're putting oil paintings on trading cards. Like my brothers are buying these dumpy ass cards of like, Mario Lemieux, like hitting a hockey puck or whatever. And I've got these incredible paintings. And here's the thing about them. They brought back a lot of really cool shit from the first line. Notably, the Blob, once again, is just standing there inhaling a huge thing, and this time it's a bowling ball. So there's this shot of him. Also, not
like he's getting hit with it. He's not eating it, right?
No, he's not. Yeah, he's not eating it. I mean, his stomach is just going like, ha ha, and he's got these fists up, and he's like, I'll take it. But these shots were dynamic as hell, like incredible hero poses, huge introductions to a lot of new characters for me. There's stuff like Captain America posters, or a card is like one of the most American things I've ever seen. It's him jumping in the air with like a giant bald eagle behind him.
No, that looks like a plate that they would sell at like 3 a.m. on Fox News.
But also, not to get horny on Maine, but like as a kid, some of these like Black Cat and Psylocke, I was like, oh, that is an incredible, very sexual pose. Like
what I love is looking at this first line. I remember as a kid, this was like the best pick. These are the best pictures I've ever seen. They're incredible. And now it's like, this looks like a junior college painting class art show. Mm-hmm. Like they're good. They're like well crafted, obviously by, trading card standards, but it's like you look at the anatomy and there's definitely like, you got a little bit of live field in here, like it's
a lot of live field. Yeah. There's you don't see a lot of feet, and you do see a lot of like ripped upper torsos. There's a lot of interesting composition on these cards, specifically Benjamin Grimm, the Thing, who it's just this incredibly zoomed in shot of his face. Like that's it. But then you've also got these like awesome battle shots, and then these really cool poses like Kingpin at his green felt table, just plotting the death of Daredevil. And then you have like genuinely scary shots like Hobgoblin, where he's got these teeth exposed and tattered hands and stuff like that. There's just like a lot of really cool, in terms of like not even just the jump in
I have not
rendering and painting. Like,
I haven't looked at these in like 35 years, and
Yeah.
it is amazing how much at the time I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And looking back at them now, I'm like, these are kind of whack.
Yeah,
Like,
they're
they're good. Obviously, it was a huge step up, but like, you know, bless his heart, Joe Jusko, for being the first guy to come out here and do all of this. But like, you know, I feel like hiring more than one person to do 162 trading cards was probably a good move for like the Fleer line. The brothers Hildebrandt, Tim and Greg Hildebrandt, who did like, I think they did the line after this, like the later Marvel Masterpieces. They were like, I think they were a little more prolific or a little more, you know, established at this point. I'm looking at the Mandarin, and it just looks like they palette swapped Manos the Hands of Fate. Like, it's really, it's not. Magneto, I know I get what they're getting at here. He's supposed to be throwing a bunch of metal objects at you, but it just looks like he's emptied out a drawer and he's throwing it at you before he runs away. Like, in the foreground, there's a hammer and a pair of pliers and like a doorknob and like a saw blade, and it's like, you couldn't have gotten a little more threatening. Like,
I will say that like a lot of the poses are interesting compared to what we were getting at the time. The Magneto one especially is really funny because it just looks like he's throwing a bunch of tools into the foreground. But I will say that like compared to a lot of the art that was on covers in 1992, this was mind blowing in terms of like the amount of depth of shading and paint being used here. And I was on like me and I went away like a year ago for like a week with my wife's family for her parents' anniversary. And me and my wife's brother spent like maybe 3 hours in a pool, just like drinking beers and talking about this line of cards and just pulling up on our phones different pictures and just be like, dude, you remember Nick Fury? Dude, he looks so cool with the cigar. And like it was so much fun to just like revisit this because like they were, again, you're right. Like looking back, a lot of them are very, you know, kind of hokey and silly. What's interesting about this is they gave Professor X his wheelchair, and in the 1991, he's just standing there. Like he's like, haha. But yeah, there's like Nomad is a wanted poster. There's a lot of really fun stuff here. The Shatterstar one's one of the best.
Yeah, some of them are killer. Some of them are like really just like.
They never knew what to do with Sandman, though. He's always just like, in this one, he's on the beach.
Well, I think there's definitely a few, like I always talk about, like there's the 4:30 on a Friday Pokemon. Mm-hmm. Like there's like Voltorb. What is he? He's just the Pokeball, but with eyes. Okay, let's call it a day and go home. The Thing one, he's clearly like,
let's go to the bar.
I don't want to draw the whole thing. I'm going to draw the Thing's face, and he's going to have like cartoon googly eyes, and the rest is just going to be rocks. Done. Call it. Sandman, he's like, all right, cool. I don't have to draw hands or feet. Just drawing sand. That's it.
Yep. Lonnie Lincoln.
Some of these are really, really wonderful.
I love that Thor is just on Rainbow Road from Mario.
A lot of them look like they're just in the middle of tripping. You know, they're supposed to be like flying dynamically, but it's just, they're like, what? Yeah. Like there's one of, I think, Namorita, and it looks like when you take a photo too late when someone's doing something and they're like halfway out of the composition. So a really cool thing that came out recently, which I feel like is a much more, so I don't know about socially acceptable, a much more convenient way to consume trading cards. And there've been a few of these in recent years, but a small hardcover book that collects an entire line. The Uncanny X-Men Trading Cards, the complete series, was published by Abrams Comics Arts a few years ago, which I think is it was a 92 X-Men line that was, I think, pre-Skybox, but it was Impel that put it out. And they were entirely done by Jim Lee. And I don't know how that guy survived all that, like, because he was doing at least two comics at that point. Yeah. And they were like, can you draw 162 trading cards or whatever? But yeah, like, this has a whole background chapter on this. It's got some of the original like ink drawings. It shows, you know, it's actually like an art book about these trading cards, and it gives some background on like the history of like the, you know, what trading cards were up to at the time. So if anybody is interested in this kind of shit, and if you've listened to us talking about it for 45 minutes, you probably are. But this has digging scans
around on this, and they don't. I think that might be the only one of those books that compiles all of those cards. Like they never really made one for Marvel Masterpieces or the original 90s cards, which sucks because you might have caught wind of this, but during the pandemic, when everybody regressed, we were all home going insane, and we were just like, I want chicken nuggies and to be 6 years old again. People went on eBay in huge numbers to recollect the entire sets of the original Marvel cards, Marvel Masterpiece cards, all those fun things. And so like little by little, people were kind of just like, oh, I'm going to get all those again. And so you can still buy full sets of them. They run anywhere between like 75, 80 and like $175. Holograms are obviously more expensive because they're harder to get. But I really wish they did more of these books like they did for the Uncanny X-Men trading cards. Because I have that one too, and it's really cool. And it's a bummer that they don't do this every couple of years for a full set of those. Because you're right, like instead of having like a big binder and building that whole thing together, it'd be cool to just have a little book where you can flip through them all.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I liked about the cards is the pictures, and a great way to put a bunch of cards together so that they don't get lost every fucking which way is to put them in a book without buying a trapper and special plastic pages. Just make a fucking book of it. It just seems like that should be, an easy enough fix, but whatever. They did that with the Star Wars Galaxy cards.
Yeah.
Let's see. They put out a book of that. Star Wars Galaxy, the original Topps trading cards. I think this. Yeah, they put this out back in like 2016.
They also
it's the same deal, and it's a gorgeous collection of like it shows you all of the cards, and it's like that same deal where they hired a bunch of random illustrators to basically draw their weirdest Star Wars fan art. And this is from such a wonderful era of just, I guess the style guide was kind of loosey-goosey because they weren't exactly putting out movies at that point, but they were like, yeah, Dave Dorman, you want to draw, Boba Fett fighting dudes somewhere? Yeah, why not? Yeah.
They did a small book. I forget this is that company that we used to work with all the time with Up at Noon, and they would send us books. Not Chronicle, but they did a book of Ralph McQuarrie art, but they also did another one of Star Wars comics, and it's like a tiny size book, like it can fit in your pocket. And I have a couple of them kicking around the house, and every now and then my kid will grab one and sit down and flip through them. That's the kind of stuff they should do with Marvel cards. Just like a little thing, a little pocket book that you can just throw on a shelf or keep on a desk, a little coffee table thing.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a rights issue because of, again, if you have this many artists with this much, like, what did they sign on to make trading cards and there was no paperwork about putting them in a book later? Sure. Yeah. I don't know what the rights are there.
I mean, there was only one medium back then. It was cards.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's such a cool, just wonderful little wormhole to fall down. I love the bizarre intersection of like, this is candy, cigarettes, and comics fused together to create cards. And then of course that all spun off into like that market collapsed. Like Marvel sold Fleer, I think like 3 years after buying it or something like that.
Yeah.
It all kind of, it imploded. And one of the things that kind of ate its lunch was the rise of collectible card games like Magic and Pokemon. And do you remember Marvel Overpower?
I do. Yeah, that was really cool. And like I remember, like I didn't get into it, but I was like, all right, I see what you're doing over there.
Oh, I hated it because I was like, you've replaced these stats that I'm allowed to argue with stats that represent a rule set that I have to figure out.
Right.
Like it used to be. Yeah.
Well, I remember that always felt like sort of a thing with Marvel. I feel like back in the day they were doing their own sort of D&D style stuff occasionally, right? Where it was like pen and paper RPGs, but for Marvel stuff.
Yeah, I mean there was the what is it, the Ultimate Marvel Source Book or whatever they put out. Yeah, which was kind of cool. It's funny if you want to buy like a hardcover version of a wiki page, like there you go.
What's interesting is looking into this. Topps is, as of 2024, doing new Marvel cards. Called Marvel Topps Chrome, and the box art is like incredibly like 80s, like the kind of stuff you'd see on like a bubble bath, or like back of a cereal box. It's incredibly rudimentary.
Well, they're definitely like
cards themselves.
They knew who their market is. They're not appealing to youngsters. The youngsters they want to buy Fortnite skins. Like this is for losers like us. Like I love it.
And then in the past few years, we got Marvel Snap, which was like this massive thing. Was like, hey, let's take all the cards, let's animate them. Like, and it didn't click with me, but I was also kind of like, all right, I respect it. Like the sort of like the ethos of Marvel cards is living on in some way, right?
Yeah. No, I found a video that somebody posted on Reddit, and it was like, hey, here's my entire complete collection of every Marvel trading card, like every Marvel trading card period. Like he had the entire thing in binders, and he just recorded a video of him flipping through all of his binders. And somebody in the comments was like, posted that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like Leo gif where he's pointing at the TV. He's like, it's me. I know that guy. But it's like Marvel Snap players recognizing cards. And it's like, that's exactly it. Like they pulled from a bunch of those older cards to create something new for a new audience. But it occurred to me that I haven't even, like, there's a whole section at at Target of like booster packs for stuff. And I just assumed at this point that it's all, Yu-Gi-Oh or keychains for shit that I don't care about. But like, maybe I'll go over there and check it out and see if they got some little trading cards over there. Cause they're fun. It's like it's a wonderful, enjoyable little trifle. What's your favorite card from that comes to mind?
I mean, I want to say it was the Gambit Marvel Masterpiece or the original Silver Surfer hologram card from the 1990 set. But I do remember, and tell me if I'm wrong here, were they doing a thing at one point where they were getting comic artists to sign cards and putting them into boxes like in incredibly rare rates? Like, because I have this story in my head that happened with Greg the Troll from Dollars and Cents, that a kid in his store opened up a pack of cards and got a Jim Lee autograph.
Yeah, no, those were part of this line.
Okay, yeah. So he got one of those, and Greg the Troll on the spot convinced him to trade it for something he had in stock that was worth more, or he pulled some shit that was like, oh, you got that in my store, it's technically mine. Some combination of the two of those things. Just some really shady, gross shit to do to a kid.
Man.
This was the same guy that like me and my dad parked outside of the store once, and me and my brother ran in to get cards, and I got Marvel cards and he got hockey cards, and we got back out to the car, and he didn't realize that the guy sold my brother minor league hockey cards, and was just like, dude, what the fuck? He went in there and he's like, why? What's wrong with you? Like, it's the same. I gave the kids $5 each to buy cards. He sold a minor. We don't know any of these motherfuckers. Like, we don't know these people. Like, what's wrong with you? He likes hockey. He's got a little Devil's hat on and shit like that. What the fuck is wrong with you? But yeah, I remember somebody in the store getting the Jim Lee autograph card, and I remember being there, and we were like, holy shit. Again, golden ticket moment, right? And within 5 minutes, the kid had been convinced to trade it for some other bullshit that Greg the Troll had in the back and relinquish rights to it forever.
God,
so yeah, that was the thing. You could get an autographed Jim Lee card, which is really fascinating because, like I've never met him, which is surprising because you and I have talked to Todd McFarlane like 20 times at this point, to the point where like when Comic-Con happens, he comes by and he's like, hey, Max, hey, Brian, how's it going? How you been? What's going on? How's the kids? I brought you some toys to look at. But Jim Lee, I've never interviewed him, never worked with him, never met him. I know a bunch of our friends have, Greg Miller's met him a bunch of times. But I've always respected the hell out of his artwork.
Oh yeah, he's fucking top tier.
Yeah, I grew up like looking at his stuff, being obsessed with it, and like, yeah, it was really like it was this hero worship thing.
Yeah.
Outside of the actual hero worship you got from the cards.
No, it's so, like I don't know. Trading cards are like by definition a trifle. They're a frivolous little distraction, but that they were such like a wonderful little stepping stone to such a huge, wonderful world of like other stuff. And like I remember, at the time, like it was comics and cards, but there was also like coin collecting and stamp collecting and toy collecting. These things all sort of interwove and overlapped. And
we had to hang out with the model train guys. Like,
sorry about that. They're weird.
They put us all under the same tent, basically.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I remember going to like coin stores were a thing that had been around for like coin collecting, and like it was easy enough for them to be like, yeah, we'll put some comics in the corner, or we'll put some cards there, and you'd wind up going to these.
All those stores pivoted, right? When like around the same time, they're all like, "Oh, how do we get kids in here?" Yeah,
it was like what's speculator market or whatever. But yeah, like I remember going. You never knew what the vibe was going to be because sometimes you'd go to a comic shop and it was like, "This is a comic shop," and sometimes you'd go to it and you're like, "This man sells coins. This man, this is coins first." I remember going to a place where, and this blew my mind. This was probably like, the very earliest days of Magic the Gathering. I might have even been buying Magic cards, which I never got into. I was like, I like the pictures. What's a Shivan dragon? But like going into this place and there were, glass cases full of coins and like valuable cards. And I was just there for like some of the cheap shit behind the counter, little packs, or buying a comic or two. And I remember seeing under one of the glass cases, and this blew my mind. They had a something carat ring that was like an X-Men class ring. It was like a legit piece of jewelry for a distinguished individual who really liked X-Men and wanted to pretend that he went to the X-Men school. And I was like, Mom, can I get that? And she's like, no, it's $250. You fucking out of your mind. And I was like, when I'm a grown up, I'm gonna get that. And now that I'm grown up, I'm still kind of like, do I want an X-Men ring?
I wonder if it's
want an
cheaper.
X-Men ring.
You should. Is it like it's like a class ring?
It was a class ring, yeah. And at this point, this is the kind of stuff you would see in like the back pages of Wizard. Like it was these high end things. But the fact that there was a very high ceiling for what you could be, how much you could be into this stuff.
Yes.
And it's kind of wild that you can go from buying like a little, $2 pack of cards that have pictures on them. And it's I don't know, it's like seeing pictures of deep sea fish, and it just tells you it's a very deep ocean out there. You're like, oh, wow, there's so much to know. There's so much to explore and so much to see and learn about. And it's like, I'm happy that it's, if it's taking the form of Marvel Snap, so be it. Like, I'm just happy that it's keeping people, curious and interested in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we were there at one point when they became Pogs. We're like, oh, how do you take trading cards and make them even smaller and make them beat each other up? Like, literally.
I bought a bunch of Pogs when they were on the downswing, and they were just selling them by the literal bucket. And that was one of those things. I'm like, these are actually pretty cool. I like these. I like having Pogs around. And then I think those were one of the things my mom just like executive decision just threw out without telling me. And I was like, what happened to all my Pogs? I lost my Pogs. She's like, gee whiz, I don't know.
It's worth pointing out, I don't know where any of my old cards are. Like you asked me right before we started recording, do you have any trading cards? And I realized I have two in front of me. I have this card that Alex Pardee sent me, which is part of his Brightmares line, which was him redoing baseball cards to be horrible. And I have this one that came with a Happy Meal toy called Uptown Mo, which is like a chicken McNugget that is wearing like a Yankees cap, and his arms are New York City subways. And then I have a couple of Dinosaurs Alive cards, which are like these cards that I got from Dinosaur Dracula, where they're just like illustrations of dinosaurs tearing up businessmen. But all of my original Marvel cards are gone. I don't know where they are.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, so yeah, it's all the more reason to go on eBay or go down to your local comic shop. But yeah, on that note, it is a Saturday morning that we're recording this on, and Saturday morning's always been a time when I want to go down to the old comic shop and see what's going on down there, and maybe get myself a treat, maybe have an ice cream cone and read a comic book. But
get yourself some coins and trains and troll dolls, maybe a beanie baby or two.
Yeah, everybody go get yourself a treat. Having a treat rules.
Get a collectible.
Spend money on something if you don't know what it is. That's the most fun way to buy a thing. Get a pack of something that's full of surprises. Who knows?
There should be holograms in more stuff, by the way. Like there should be like a 1 in 20 odds of getting a hologram when I buy toilet paper.
You know what I liked was with the other thing was like the half measure was chromium.
Yes.
And for like the longest time, I thought chromium was like this awesome thing that you wanted. And then I saw Aaron Brockovich, and chromium is like the chemical that's killing all these kids. And I was like, oh, I probably should not be playing with all those X-Men trading cards that have chromium on them. I hope I don't get.
Do you know 1 in 20 DVD copies of Aaron Brockovich is actually a chromium? No, I'm kidding.
Doing a chromium cover Aaron Brockovich would be some sick shit. Anyway,
thank you for listening.
That's a Soderbergh story for another day.
Marvel cards rule. They have and always will, no matter what form they take. Thank you, Max.
Yeah.
That was a blast.
Enough said.
Oh, wait, hold up. One more thing. Before we go, just a very friendly reminder / desperate plea for all of our listeners to support the show however you can.
Each and every single like, share, subscribe, rating, review, follow, favorite, bookmark, upvote, and comment we receive helps us grow our audience.
Even a good up dog helps us out.
Every single little tidbit of organic interaction we get helps convince those cold, unfeeling algorithms that this show is actually worth anyone's time.
Good old-fashioned word of mouth works too, so if you think this show rules, tell people about it. Tell your friends,
lovers, strangers, enemies, whoever.
And of course, we might have mentioned kicking us $1 or $2 on Patreon is huge. Also has some really cool perks.
For instance, $1 a month gets access to bonus content. $5 gets you each week's episode on Tuesdays instead of Fridays.
And for a few dollars more, you can help decide the good, bad, and ugly topics for future episodes.
Head to patreon.com/thisthingrules to see for yourself. However you support the show, even if it's just making time to listen to us talk about our favorite stuff, you rule, and we love you for it. We'll see you next week. Or we'll hear you next week. Or you hear us.
You'll hear us.
We'll talk to you later.
Next week.
And last but not least, a big, huge special thanks to our Patreon executive producers for helping keep the lights on. Brennan Bova, Ben Burkhalter, Kevin Lemasurier, Steve Cam, Donald Cole, Billy McKendry, Chip Chunkling, Scott Davis, and Go-Go Jason Waterfalls. You are all fantastic. You rule. Thank you.
You may think you know the origin of the Fantastic Four, but until you see the far-out version we have waiting for you, you've only scratched the surface. And no dyed-in-the-wool Marvelite wants to be a surface scratcher, right? But hey, not only will you see the world's favorite superhero team battling the pernicious puppet master, you'll also catch them starring on Dick Clark's TV show,